Alright, so we're going to look at the idea of rounding, but I want to give you a situation where you would need this rounding. I'm going to the store. I mean, this is a very real world situation. We can all relate to going to the store wanting to buy something. But usually when I go to the store, I buy more than one item. But I don't carry calculators with me, and I don't carry a pencil and paper. But I do have a budget. I have a certain amount of money I can spend. So as I'm picking items off the shelf that I want to buy, I have to know that I can afford all of those. So what skill do I really use to help me mentally add this up in my head so that I know that when I get to the checkout, I have enough money? Well, I would use an idea of rounding. And so I want to teach you how to round numbers so that when you're in a situation like that, you can use rounding to help you so you don't overspend and have to put back something, because that would be awful. Wouldn't you want to know that when you have everything in your cart that you can actually afford it? So let's look at how we do that. So let's say that we'll start with whole number rounding. We'll start with something simple. For example, let's say I have the number 84. I need to round this number. In fact, it seems like I really need to round to the nearest tens place. I want to get, and rounding to me is like working with an easier number. If I wanted to add like 84 plus 12, I could use rounding to add easier numbers. There are easier numbers than these two that can get me close to my solution. So that's kind of where we're going with this. But let's say 84. And I know that some people want to say, oh, I know a rule that's going to help me. 4 or less, let it rest, 5 or more, raise the score. But why does that work? There's a reason. Numbers, when we look at numbers like on a number line, okay? Now number lines are just lines that contain numbers in sequential order. That's what a number line is. You can use a number line for really anything. But we're going to use it to help us see what would be a better number to work with in our head than 84. So when I'm thinking I'm going to round, and I said to the nearest tens, well, this is my tens place. So I want to look at the nearest group of tens around this number. Well, 8, the value of 8 is 80. So I would start here. Well, what's the next group of tens that it could be? Like if I looked at a hundreds chart. I'm going to get a hundreds chart real quick so I can show you. Okay, so a hundreds chart, we have numbers that are going next to each other. So let's say I'm picking out 84. I'm trying to figure out where is it closer to. Now, you'll notice that with this hundreds chart, it has 10, then 20, 30, 40. Well, pretend that we had to start this line with the first group of tens. Well, that would be 80, then 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90. So I look at the number 84. And I'm rounding to the nearest group of 10. So it's either going to be 80 or it's going to be close to 90. Those are the groups of 10s that I'm looking at. So on my number line, let's just say I compare it to my hundreds chart. Where does 84 fall? Well, it's about here. So, and let's look at what would be the halfway point. Let's say I want to know what was halfway between 80 and 90. Well, 85 is halfway between. If I count, there's an even distance, the same distance between 85 to 90 and 85 to 80. And that's why 85 is halfway, because it's the equal distance. It's the halfway mark. Like when you're running a race, you get halfway through, you know, it's exciting because you've already made it to the halfway point. So that means you're closer to the end than you were when you started. But let's say where would this number fall? Well, if I look at that, 84 is 1 less than 85. So it would be about here. And on my chart, it's right here next to 85. So when I look at that, that means when I round this number, 80 is a good rounded number because it's closest to 80. Not because, well, the 4 says 4 or less, so I let it rest. Sure, yes, we're going to let it stay at 80, but this is why it stays at 80. Not because of the rule, but because of where it lies here. Because it's closer to 80 than it is to 90. Let's look at another number. Let's say I was looking at the number 148. And in my head, I'm using 148 and other numbers. Well, I want to round that number to make it easier. Dependent on the situation, I could round it to the nearest hundreds place or could round to the nearest tens. Now, if I'm at the store and I want to buy something, I probably want to round to the nearest tens place because I want to kind of get close to it. I don't want to be so far away because if I say the hundreds place, it's either 100 or 200, and I want to know a more close estimate. So I might look at that tens. So 148 round to nearest tens. Let's look at it on a number line. If I'm looking at the tens place and I want to round it to the nearest tens, that means I'm looking for the nearest group of tens. The first group of tens, based on this number and the value of the 4, would be 140. Then the next group would be 150. And look, there's a pattern here. I don't necessarily look at the 100. I don't have to worry about that. I'm really trying to get close to here. But on a number line, I need to understand that this is between 140 and 150. But where? Well, let's do our benchmark halfway point. What is halfway between 140 and 150? Well, I could count by ones, 141, 142, 143, and so forth. What I will find is there's a halfway point of 145. Where does this number go now? So easy. Well, if this is my halfway, I see 148 is more than 145. So somewhere on this side it's going to go. If I were to make a really good idea of where it would go, this would be about where 148 goes. So based on that, what would it be rounded to? 150. So 148 is about 150. And that to me might be an easier number. Now let's say I wanted to look at it and I need to know the nearest hundreds. I want to know what hundreds is it closest to. Well, same idea, just using different numbers. Now, I want to know what group of 100 that number is closest to. Well, 148 it could be close to 100, but the next group of 100 would be 200. I know like 100, 200, 300, 400, those are all groups of 100. 10, 20, 30, 40, those are all groups of 10. Those are rounded numbers that are easy for me to work with in my head when I'm out and about and I don't have a calculator or a pencil or pen to use. So, where would it go? Well, what's my halfway point? What's halfway between 100 and 200? I know that halfway between 0 and 100 is 50. So if I follow, there's a pattern there. That means between 100 and 200, the halfway point is 150. So, where does this go? I know that 148 is less than 150. And so because I know that, it's going to go somewhere here. I would say a good idea of where, I bet it goes about right there. So, but where is it closest to? It's closest to the 100. So, if I were to round this to the nearest hundreds, it's about 100. If I were to round to the nearest group of tens, it's about 150. Dependent on what the situation is, I would have to figure out what am I going to round it to. But I need to know how to round. Now, there's one tricky part here. What happens when we have a number like this? Remember our rule, 4 or less, let it rise, 5 or more, raise score. Why does it work? Because on the number line it works. Let's say I have a number here, 55. I need to round it. I'm buying something that's $55, something else that's $49, something that's $39. Oh, I can't add all that in my head. But if I round it, I can do that a lot easier and get close. So I want to know a rounded number for that. I look at the number line. I know how to set up my number lines. That means it's either 50 or 60 because that number goes between 50 and 60. But where? What's my halfway point? My halfway point is 55. It's the same distance from both. So where do I go from here? Which number is it rounded to? I could argue that it's 50 or 60. But if I look at a number line like it's a hill, and I make this number line a curvy number line, and I start with 50, and the ending point 60, and I'm up here at 55. If I'm walking up a hill, am I more likely to go backwards down the hill or continue going over the hill? In real life, what would I do? I would go over that hill, because if I've already made it halfway, why not keep going the distance? So, with this idea in mind, when we have this kind of number, we can say that it's going to be, we're going to use 60 as a rounded number, because it's going to be a little bit closer, it's going to go to 60 rather than 50. 55 and 60. To me, that's good. And you know what? If I'm at the store and I round 55 to 60, I have a few extra dollars to work with. I might be able to buy a piece of gum, or maybe some extra candy that I really don't need to eat, but I would love to buy some little extra candy for me. And that little extra amount that I have that's rounded, I can use when I'm at the store. So this is just an idea of what rounding looks like, and with whole numbers. And when we look at the rule, 5 or more raise a score, 4 or less let it rest. A lot of people just look at that second number. Yes, that second number is what helps us decide how to round it, but it's the number line and where the numbers fall closest to. That's what makes us decide that that rule is actually going to work.